Professor Marandi, I had one final topic I wanted to cover with you. So, the United States was attempting to bomb Yemen, and Ansarallah demonstrated an incredible deterrence capability. According to Ansarallah sources, they're saying that they use ballistic missiles, winged missiles, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones to repel the United States. And so this has me wondering, where do you see this taking Israel and the United States from here on forward? Because Yemen is a small country. Ansar Allah, as powerful as they are not a standing military, yet they have demonstrated something that appears to me to be absolutely unprecedented in the history of this region.
Ansar Allah is becoming more powerful, and their military capabilities are becoming more advanced and more sophisticated. And the Hezbollah has a lot up its sleeve too. There is a lot that hasn't been revealed, but more than anything else is Iran's capabilities. No one knows what Iran did to stop the Israelis from striking. And I should add that the Americans were deeply involved in the Israeli regime airstrike on Iran. Deeply involved. The Americans did the heavy lifting, just as they do the heavy lifting when Iran strikes the Israeli regime. They were very deeply involved in the attack on Iran. And this operation was supposed to be much bigger, but they failed from the very start. Their F-35s were picked up on radar. They simply couldn't do anything that they thought they would be able to do. And Iran's defense capabilities, its radar capabilities are still unknown. They have more hidden secrets, and Iran's offensive capabilities are still unknown to the Israelis. And we have to keep in mind that the Americans are also fighting in Ukraine, and they have escalating conflict with China. They are simply weakening themselves by fighting all these different wars and escalating on all these fronts, and also at the same time showing the world that they are genocidal. The United States, Britain, France, Germany, Brussels, the Canadians, New Zealand, the EU, Australia, they've all exposed themselves to be genocidal, these regimes. They've destroyed themselves. They've destroyed their credibility, their image across the world. But also they're depleting their capabilities through engaging in hostilities on multiple fronts and against multiple nations. So this is not going to end well for the West. And but I think many in the West are too arrogant to see it. They still live in their bubble of exceptionalism, American exceptionalism, Eurocentric, a sense of Eurocentric superiority. They think that somehow they'll win and somehow they'll pull through, and they'll pull a rabbit out of the hat. But I just see things getting worse at a time when the U.S. economy and Western economies are in a very precarious situation. But time will tell.
Feels like, for Israel is really a pet project for the United States. It is vitally important that Israel remains a stable entity, a stable occupation entity in this region, one that is militarily capable as well. But right now, what we're seeing, it seems, is you have Yemen being able to conduct such a significant operation of deterrence against the United States. We hear different things coming out of Trump's mouth of, oh, well, we don't want war with Iran. But we've also heard Trump say, well, Israel can do what it wants and finish the job. But how can it essentially, quote unquote, finish the job if it is completely and utterly mired, not just in its own lust for blood, but also the fact that it does have to fight? The more, this is how resistance goes, the more that you do terrorize and destroy and attempt to destroy a population and a nation of people, the more fight back you were going to get. And that seems to be swelling more and more and more.
Yes, and the Israeli regime has made the term Zionism a very ugly word to people across the world. And in a sense, it's the ugliness of the Israeli regime and its backers is perhaps in many ways unprecedented. in world history, because not only because of their sheer hypocrisy, because in the past, despots usually they killed, but they never preached at the same time. Saddam Hussein or Hitler, when he invaded Iraq or when Hitler invaded uh, Russia, he didn't preach about human rights or anything like that. They just slaughtered and moved forward. These people preach as they slaughter, but also they're slaughtering in front of a global audience. They're doing it day and night and preaching to us at the same time. So Israel, they've destroyed themselves, and the only job, if Trump, is saying that Israel should finish the job, the only thing that's going to be finished is the Israeli regime. This war is just going to make things worse for the Israelis. It's going to cement hatred for the regime. It's going to cement hatred for the West. Every day that goes by, the outrage across the world, the hatred and animosity is further cemented. There's a new layer of hatred put upon the previous layer. This is not going to go away anymore. And so uh, Israel cannot finish the job. The only thing that is going to end is the existence of the Zionist project. We will have dark days ahead. We will have dark weeks ahead. We will have painful moments in the weeks and months ahead. But I'm confident that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that this apartheid genocidal regime will ultimately come to an end, and that we will have a Palestine where, from the river to the sea, where Jews, Christians, and Muslims all have equal rights because they'll all be considered as equal human beings, unlike what Zionists believe, where they are a chosen people and others are Amalek, and we're all Amalek in their eyes.
One of the things I've heard is not only do you have Hamas and the overall resistance in Palestine fighting back, but you also have, because of this constant push of displacement and, of course, murder that Israel is conducting, you have Palestinians themselves. They're moving, but they're not leaving. And
Yeah.
the same is true also for Lebanese. There's a lot of displaced, but they don't want to leave Lebanon. And what this says to me, Professor Marandi, is that there's a deep connection, it seems, between this pain that Israel is in the United States backing and is trying to inflict on people. I think the overall vision is for the United States and its Israeli regime is that the more pain you inflict, the more you can separate people from their national identity, the more you can separate people from their land, the better it is for the United States and Israel to cement their hegemony. But I think what we're seeing is actually people coming together around the resistance to this and resisting in and of themselves. It doesn't mean you have to be a member of Ansar Allah or Hamas or anything to be part of this resistance. I think we're seeing it too with the people. They want this to end, and they're sacrificing everything, their lives, everything that they have to not cower to this form of terror.
And I think perhaps the most extraordinary part of all of this, in addition to all that you've said, is that the people of Lebanon, they are being subjected to terror and to slaughter. But not only are they sticking and to their guns, not only are they holding their positions, their political positions, not only are they resisting, but they won't forsake the Palestinian people. For Hezbollah, this is not just about Lebanon. For the resistance and its supporters, it's not just about Lebanon. They will be steadfast. They will defeat the Israeli regime in Lebanon. But they are making a special sacrifice. They're making these sacrifices. They're sacrificing their children. They're sacrificing their lives for the sake of Palestine, for the sake of the children of Gaza, for the sake of the Palestinians being subjugated in the West Bank and within the 1967 borders. And I think there's something very, very special in that. And the whole region, in a sense, is doing that. Ansarullah, the Iraqis, the Syrians, Lebanon, Iran, everyone here is defending their sovereignty. They're resisting against Western domination and hegemony, but none of them are willing to forsake the Palestinian people. And I think I once said this on your show before. The Hezbollah, Iran, Ansarullah could have all done a deal with the West. And the United States would give them the world to just turn away and give up on Palestine. But that's never going to happen. And I think that is quite extraordinary. But in addition to that, and as you pointed out, this axis of resistance, its resilience is amazing, but so is the broader resistance. People from beyond the region, people in the United States, in Europe, and in Asia, in Africa and Latin America, who are a part of this resistance from all religions and ethnicities and different backgrounds and different walks of life. You see a global resistance. I remember there was a young lady in Seoul who was protesting for months by herself against the genocide in Gaza, but now it's growing. These are heroes. These are unsung heroes that exist across the world, who are part of this resistance, who are making sacrifices. Many lose their jobs, many experience a lot of difficulty, but they continue to resist, not for their own sake. Someone living in Seoul or some young Jew in New York, they don't gain anything from resisting. They make sacrifices, but they're doing it for the people of Palestine. They're doing it for the people of Lebanon, the people of Syria who are being now bombed regularly. And that, I think, is something quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I believe this is why Israel is actually doomed because, there's a lot of pessimism in the collective West, I believe, even for those who are very sympathetic or even in solidarity with Palestine, where they view Palestine as kind of abandoned by the world. And you could say this is true to some degree, but if we look at the axis of resistance, indeed, there is absolutely no abandonment there. There is, as you said, a great sacrifice. One where I think you're exactly right, Professor Marandi. Of course, Hezbollah. How many ceasefire agreements has Hezbollah been presented, especially by the United States? We probably couldn't even count them since this whole thing began, October 7th, October 8th, 2023. How many times has the United States gone on the phone with Iran and said, "Hey, could you stop doing X, Y, and Z?" Around Israel. And so, and the same could be said about Yemen. Yemen has gone through its own genocidal onslaught that still is having ramifications into today, but yet they are stepping up their operations for Palestine. So, and that doesn't even include what you just mentioned with others around the world standing in protest against what the Israeli regime is doing. So, in this sense, Professor Marandi, we can close maybe your final thoughts on what exactly this says about the resistance, because why Israel is doomed is that this isn't going to end. It's one of those historical moments we've seen in the past where regimes like this are stood up to, and that there is this breaking point moment that often occurs where no longer is this kind of horror, which just absolutely accelerated after October 7th, 2023. No longer is this type of horror, this type of occupation, this type of system tolerated anymore.
Absolutely. And I would also add that about Iran. Iran has made great sacrifices for Palestine for 4 decades. Sanctions, maximum pressure sanctions, all these have been about Palestine. All of the attempts to undermine Iran, to impoverish Iranian society, to turn people against one another, the terror attacks that we regularly see in Iran over the decades, the war that was imposed upon Iran, all of these were about Palestine. And today, Iran is supporting the axis of resistance at a cost as well, a financial cost, not just the sanctions, but the cost of financing these groups. And also, when Iran strikes the Israeli regime and the Israelis try to strike back, these are all costs. And when the True Promise 3 comes and people across the world will be seeing it with joy, uh, that will come at a cost, and there will be a threat of expanded war. But Iran is doing this because it is unacceptable for us to see genocide in Palestine. And just as it's unacceptable for the resistance in Lebanon and the resistance in Yemen and Syria and Iraq, it is unacceptable for Iran. And I think that this is something that should make people rethink Iran, Yemen, and the axis of resistance. Why is it that they are willing to pay such a heavy price to stop a genocide? And why is it that the forces arrayed against them are so hell-bent on continuing with the Holocaust? What does this say about the axis of resistance, and what does it say about its opponents? And what its opponents have been saying about the axis of resistance for the last 4 decades. I think people should rethink Iran, rethink the axis of resistance, and look at things from a different perspective, and maybe they'll understand better the history of the last few decades. But I, in any case, am very optimistic about the future. As I said earlier, we are going to have dark days ahead. There's going to be very painful moments where you see major massacres carried out, and you'll see the Americans and Europeans justify it, and you'll see the Australians and New Zealand and Canada and everyone doing their best to preserve this ethno-supremacist regime and to impose it on the people of the region. But it's going to fail, and people will be disturbed to see great outrages and then watch the BBC try to justify it, or CNN try to justify it, or the New York Times, or Trump, or Biden, or whoever. But I'm optimistic, and none of us have the luxury of being depressed or for feeling hopeless. We all have a lot of work to do. We all should remain as active as possible, because people are making huge sacrifices right now in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza, in the West Bank. And so it's our responsibility to do what we can to assist them.
Indeed. And Professor Marandi, we had one audience question. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, not least because I am sharing you on the screen here, but also because some of the language, believe it or not, might get censored. So I'll just read it. This audience member who gave a super chat, Iranian Kiddo, said, "When is Iran going to avenge the death of the 4 Iranian soldiers whose lives were taken in the attack in late October? What is the wait?" We covered this a bit in the beginning, but Professor Marandi, your response.
True Promise 3 it will happen, and it's not far off. Just as True Promise 1 and 2 were very significant, and people gradually lost patience and some lost hope, but ultimately they took place. True Promise 3 will take place. It will be much bigger than True Promise 2 and much bigger than True Promise 1. And hopefully it will be a major blow to the Israeli regime, and it will force it to rethink, and hopefully the West to rethink, even though the West is pushing for escalation as we speak. And as I said, the attackings, the terror accusations, the fake terror accusations, the censure of Iran at the UN, the swift funding for Ukraine right now. I think right now they're pushing for escalation, but ultimately, I hope that with True Promise 3, that the pain will be so much that it will force the Israeli regime to rethink and to recognize that it's not going to win. And hopefully the Americans and Europeans will see that they're faced with a force that they simply cannot defeat. And it's best to end it as swiftly for their own sake. They don't care about Palestinian lives. They don't care about Lebanese lives. Western embassies in Lebanon, instead of caring for the victims, they're conspiring against them. Mainstream Western journals, instead of telling the truth about what the Israelis are doing to Lebanon, they're trying to justify it. Whenever Lebanese civilians are being targeted, they call them Hezbollah. They say these are Hezbollah targets or Hezbollah sites or Hezbollah strongholds in order to create this fake narrative that military targets are being struck, whereas what the Israeli regime is doing is it's getting revenge on Hezbollah supporters, on resistance supporters, on supporters of the Palestinian people, those who are most dedicated to supporting the people of Gaza. But I think that True Promise 3, when it comes, the person who asked this question will have a very nice smile on his or her face.